What if I told you that the entire history of Christianity could have been completely different because of a single step that almost didn't happen? What if I told you that the greatest individual miracle ever recorded, an ordinary man walking on water, only existed because someone decided to do something that no one else would do, and that this moment almost didn't happen? Now imagine this: a night darker than sin, the Sea of Galilee in fury, waves like walls, a boat creaking as if it were about to break in two, 12 men trapped between fear, exhaustion, and despair, and then a figure appears walking on the water, not floating, not hovering, stepping, as if water were stone. The disciples scream, thinking it's a ghost, but the voice that comes from that figure cuts through the wind like a sword. It is I. Do not be afraid. And then something happens that changed everything. Peter opens his mouth. But what if he hadn't opened it? What if he had stayed quiet? What if he had chosen safety over obedience? What if, when Jesus said, "Come," Peter had replied, "No, this is madness"? And here's the question that explodes the story. If Peter hadn't left the boat, who would he have become? Who would the church have become? What would you have missed? And because someone chose not to attempt the impossible, because this isn't just a story about Peter, it's about you and all the boats you're still sitting in. And today, we're going to explore the alternate version that nobody tells. The story would be different if Peter had not left the boat. Get ready, because maybe this story speaks much more about your life than you imagine. Welcome to The Story Would Be Different If, the only channel where we take biblical stories and ask, what if things had gone very wrong? Sea of Galilee, fourth watch of the night, between 3 and 6 a.m., approximately 29 AD. 12 men are in a boat being violently tossed about by waves. They have rowed all night, hours of exhausting work against the wind. Muscles burn, hands are injured, and they are getting nowhere. The wind prevents them from moving forward. And then, in the pre-dawn darkness, they see something impossible. A figure walking on the water, not floating, not swimming, walking, as if water were solid ground, as if physics didn't exist, as if gravity were suggestion, not law, immediate terror. It's a ghost. They scream in fear. Experienced fishermen, men who live by the sea, know its laws. Water cannot support human weight. Whatever that thing is walking on the waves, it's not natural, it's not normal, it's not human. But then a voice cuts through the wind. Take heart, it is I. Do not be afraid, it is Jesus. Somehow the master who sent them ahead while he dismissed the crowd, who remained praying alone on the mountain, is now walking on stormy water as if it were the pavement of Jerusalem. And Peter, always impetuous, always the first to speak, always wavering between bold faith and dramatic doubt, shouts back, "Lord, if it is you, command me to come to you on the water." Stop here. Absorb the madness of this petition. Peter didn't say, "Jesus, come to the boat and save us." He didn't ask Jesus to calm the storm. He asked him to do the impossible, to get out of the boat safely and walk on water. Why? Perhaps because Peter understood something. Being where Jesus is safer than being in the boat without him. Perhaps because faith doesn't want to observe miracles from a distance. It wants to participate in them. Perhaps because something in Peter recognized, this is the definitive moment. If Jesus can walk on water, and if he calls me, I can too. Jesus answers with one word, a single word that changes everything. Come. Don't wait until the storm passes. Don't stay safe in the boat. Don't, you're not ready. Just come. A simple invitation to do the impossible. Peter faces a character-defining choice. Stay in the boat or go out into the storm. All logic. The screams stay. The boat is tangible, solid, proven. It has sailed through storms before. It's a known means of survival. 11 other disciples are on board. Why would you be any different? But there is the voice of Jesus saying, come. There is the example of Jesus walking on water. There is an invitation to an experience that no human in history has had, to walk on water, to defy physics, to do the impossible not because you are special, but because the one who calls you is able. Peter put one leg out of the boat, then the other, and he stepped into the water. And the water, violent, stormy, chaotic, became solid beneath his feet. For a few glorious moments, Peter did what no human has done. He walked on water, not because he could, because Jesus said, come, and he obeyed. Of course, doubt followed. When he saw the strong wind, he was afraid, and beginning to sink, cried out, "Lord, save me." Immediately Jesus grabbed him and said, "You of little faith, why did you doubt?" Critics love to focus on Peter's doubt. See, he almost drowned. He should have stayed in the boat. But wait, Peter is the only human besides Jesus who walked on water. He may have doubted and sunk, but he also dared and walked. The other 11 stayed dry in the boat, but they also missed out on experiencing the impossible. But what if Peter hadn't left? What if, when Jesus said, "Come," Peter had replied, "Lord, I respect you greatly, but this is madness. I'm going to stay here in the boat. It's safer, more sensible, more reasonable. I admire that you walk on water, but I am not you." What if Peter had chosen safety instead of obedience? In the true story, Peter got out. He walked on water. He doubted and began to sink. He cried out for help. Jesus held him. Together they returned to the boat, and when they got in, the wind ceased. The disciples worshipped him. "Truly, you are the Son of God." But notice what Peter gained in those moments on the water. Not just the experience of walking on water, although that alone is extraordinary. He gained something deeper, experiential knowledge that obedience to Jesus defies natural laws, that when Jesus says, "Come," impossibilities become possibilities, that where Jesus is, you can be too, no matter how impossible the path may seem. And he also learned a crucial lesson about doubt. He learned it not through theory, but through a near-drowning experience. Taking your eyes off Jesus and focusing on the circumstances is a recipe for sinking. While he looked at Jesus, he walked. When he looked at the wind, he sank. A visceral lesson that you don't learn in a classroom. You only learn it when you are literally sinking and being rescued. Most importantly, Peter learned that even when faith fails, grace does not. He began to sink, but Jesus immediately caught him. There was no long sermon about lack of faith. There was no, "I told you so." Just Jesus' hand grabbing before Peter drowned. Instant rescue. Automatic grace. These lessons shaped Peter for the rest of his life. Decades later, he would write about tests of faith like gold refined by fire. He would write about casting all your anxiety on Jesus because he cares for you. He would write with the authority of someone who had experienced failure and rescue, who had known sinking and being held on. But what if Peter never left the boat? What lessons remain unlearned? First, radical obedience opens doors that logic locks. Staying in the boat is logical. Going out into the storm is madness. Until Jesus says, "Come." Peter would never learn that Jesus' call transforms madness into sanity, the impossible into the possible. He would remain a man of logic, not a man of faith. Second, where Jesus is, it is safer than where Jesus is not. The boat seemed safe, but it was battling a storm. The water seemed dangerous, but it sustained Peter when Jesus said, "Come." It's not the environment that determines safety. It's the presence of Jesus. Peter would never learn that. Being with Jesus in an impossible place is safer than being without Jesus in a safe place. Third, faith is not the absence of doubt. It is acting despite it. Peter doubted, and that almost sank him. But before doubting, he acted. He left the boat when everyone else stayed. He didn't have perfect faith. He had enough faith to take the first step, and that made all the difference. If he had stayed in the boat, he would never have learned that imperfect faith that acts overcomes perfect faith that paralyzes. Fourth, Jesus rescues you when you are sinking. Perhaps most crucially, Peter experienced not only walking on water, but being rescued when he failed. He knew not only Jesus' power to do the impossible, but Jesus' grace when you mess up the impossible. If he had never walked on water, he would never have needed rescuing. He would never have known Jesus as a personal and immediate Savior in a moment of failure. But the consequences go beyond personal lessons. Peter was no ordinary disciple. He was a leader among the 12. Jesus would call him Peter, rock, and say, "And on this rock I will build my church." On the day of Pentecost, Peter would preach and 3,000 would be saved. He would write 2 epistles that guide Christians to this day. He would be the first to proclaim the gospel to the Gentiles. He would lead the early church through persecution, controversy, and explosive growth. And this Peter, leader, preacher, writer, pillar of the church, was formed through experiences like walking on water. Every time he stepped out of the boat, literally or figuratively, every time he dared and failed and was rescued, he was being molded into the rock upon which the church would be built. If Peter hadn't left the boat that night, something crucial in his formation would have been missing. He would have remained a cautious fisherman who became a disciple, not a fisherman transformed into a bold apostle. There would always have been that timidity, that preference for security, that tendency to calculate risks instead of obeying calls. Think about Peter's future moments. When Jesus is arrested, Peter follows him from afar and then denies him 3 times, a devastating failure. But after the resurrection, Jesus restores Peter. "Peter, do you love me? Feed my sheep." And Peter accepts restoration, leads the church, and eventually dies as a martyr for Jesus. But doesn't Peter's ability to be restored after failing come partly from having failed before and been rescued? Walking on water and beginning to sink was a rehearsal for denying Jesus and being restored. He learned the pattern. I fail. Jesus rescues me. I continue. Without the experience of the boat, perhaps denial would have destroyed Peter permanently. Perhaps shame would have paralyzed him. Perhaps he would never have accepted restoration because he had never before experienced being rescued after visibly failing. And consider Peter's preaching in Acts. He preaches with incredible authority, but also with grace for the weak. When he speaks of faith, he speaks as one who knows both power and weakness. When he speaks of grace, he speaks as one who has experienced it personally. His epistles are full of encouragement for those who suffer, who doubt, who fail. Why? Because he was the one who doubted, failed, and was rescued. If Peter had never left the boat, perhaps he would have preached moralism. Be faithful, be strong, do not doubt. But because he left, failed, and was saved, he preaches the gospel. You will fail, but Jesus will rescue you. You will doubt, but grace is greater. You will sink, but he is already reaching out. The early church didn't just need leaders who never failed. It needed leaders who failed and experienced redemption, who attempted the impossible and learned about grace, who set sail from boats and discovered both the power and mercy of Jesus. Peter, wet and ashamed but redeemed, became that leader. But what about Peter, who remains safe? In the boat, he becomes a different kind of leader, more cautious, more religious, less gracious, more focused on not failing than on daring for Jesus. The church under this Peter would be different, safer perhaps, but also colder, more righteous perhaps, but also more distant from those who are sinking and need rescuing. But Peter got out of the boat, and yes, it sank. And yes, Jesus said, "You of little faith." But notice, Jesus didn't say, "You shouldn't have gotten out." He didn't criticize the boldness. He criticized the doubt. Getting out of the boat was right. Walking on water was right. The mistake was taking their eyes off Jesus and focusing on the wind. So the lesson isn't stay in the boat, it's get out of the boat, but keep your eyes on Jesus. The message isn't be cautious, it's be bold but stay focused. The teaching isn't don't take risks, it's risk everything when Jesus says come, but don't trust yourself, trust him. And here is the revolutionary truth. All the other disciples remained dry, Peter remained wet. But who had a story to tell? Who experienced the impossible? Who knew both miracle and redemption? Who learned lessons that no book teaches? Peter. You can live your whole life in the boat, safe, dry, reasonable. It will never sink, but you will also never walk on water. You will never know what it's like to obey when everything says, stay. You will never experience Jesus sustaining you where physics says you should sink. You will never know personal, visceral, immediate rescue when you fail. The story would be different if, had Peter stayed in the boat, he would have been just another disciple, just another fisherman who followed Jesus, just one among 11. But because he left, because he dared, he failed, he was rescued, he became Peter, the rock, the leader, the Pentecost preacher, the man the church remembers not for perfection, but for imperfect boldness that found perfect grace. Your boat. Where is it? What is it? Everyone has one. A secure job that pays the bills but kills the soul. A comfortable but shallow relationship. A predictable routine that eliminates risk but also eliminates life. A small ministry that you control instead of a big calling that scares you. Talents go unused because failure would be obvious. Dreams not pursued because success seems impossible. Conversations not initiated because rejection would hurt. Forgiveness not given because resentment is familiar. The boat isn't always a bad place. It's a legitimate place. But it's not your destination when Jesus is on the water saying, come. And perhaps you're thinking, But I could sink. Peter sank. Exactly. And Jesus caught him. Immediately. Automatically. Without hesitation. The question isn't, what if I sink? It's, when I sink, will Jesus be there? And the answer is, always. Jesus is not on the boat. He is on the water, defying physics, inviting you to the impossible. He could get in the boat. He did eventually. But first, he invites you to get out. Why? Because on the boat you learn about Jesus from others. On the water you meet Jesus personally. On the boat you hear about miracles. On the water you experience miracles. Then leave. Step outside the boat. Don't wait for courage. Courage comes after obedience, not before. Don't wait to feel ready. No one feels ready to walk on water. Don't wait for guarantees. The only guarantee is that Jesus said, "Come," and he is faithful. And when you start to sink, because you will begin, we all begin, it's not the end. It's an opportunity to know Jesus as your Redeemer, to experience his hand holding you, to learn that grace is not theological theory, it's physical reality when you are literally sinking and he literally grabs you. Peter walked on water for a moment. He sank for seconds, he was rescued immediately, and he gained a story that has been told for 2,000 years. He gained lessons that shaped the church. He gained knowledge of Jesus that theory could never provide. The 11 remained dry and safe. Peter remained wet and transformed. Which do you prefer? Stop admiring Jesus from a distance in the boat. Go out and find him where he is. Yes, it's a storm. Yes, it's impossible. Yes, you might sink. But when Jesus says come, the risk of staying is greater than the risk of leaving, because a boat without Jesus eventually sinks. But water with Jesus sustains. He comes. He's saying it now. Not tomorrow when you feel stronger. Not after the storm has passed. Now in the storm with high waves and strong winds. Come. It's not an invitation for the qualified. It's an invitation for the willing. Peter was no more qualified than the other 11. He was simply more willing to appear crazy for Jesus. And this willingness to appear crazy became a gateway to experiencing the impossible. Are you going to leave, or are you going to stay and watch, dry and safe, while the extraordinary life with Jesus unfolds outside your boat? Thank you for watching. The story would be different if Peter challenges us. What safe boat do you need to leave? What impossible invitation from Jesus are you ignoring? Share this video with someone who needs to get out of the boat. And in the comments, what moment of radical boldness would you like us to explore next?